back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And Baltimore Positive, Dennis Koulatsos does a little radio show here, usually about sports when we're doing sports things on Thursdays between 3 and 5. And, of course, our friends at Coons Ford Security Boulevard sponsor our WNST tech service as well. Dennis, for the slowdown in sports or the stoppage of sports, the Ravens still percolate. I have noticed some WNST texts coming my way, and certainly whether it was the Brockers situation last week or the draft situation coming down the line, it doesn't feel like this is going to completely stop the NFL's business, right?
Well, the NFL has to be loving this. I mean, they're the only game in town right now. We're talking about them. Free agency still going strong, and I'm sure they're doing all they can to prepare for the draft, right? April 25th through the 27th, I believe, and 28th, whatever the time frame is. But
I've lost track. I don't even know what day it is.
Yeah, they have a captive audience, right? So they're going to play it up bigger and brighter than ever. And for us draftniks, I mean, I can't tell you how many simulated drafts I've conducted in my spare time, right? All these different scenarios. As the Ravens have a lot of draft capital, so if you're a Ravens fan like we are, this is just a great time of the year to try to figure out how this team is going to look and speculate, because that's all we can do at this time.
Well, I think we're all worried about whether they're going to play, and certainly, as this thing drags on and you start to get into it a little bit, you feel like baseball might not, and the NBA and the NHL talking about, playing finals in the summer, into August, into September, and picking up games in season. It will be fascinating to see how all those parts go together, but in the meantime, for now, for the next month, for the foreseeable future, other than pandemic and Hogan in the morning and Trump in the afternoon and, let's keep each other safe and all of that, the sports part of this for the whole population here is football and business as normal to some degree. And I think from the Ravens' perspective the last couple of weeks, there has been something to talk about above and beyond anything else. There's been no other sports conversation that really can be had other than some cute videos out on Instagram or whatnot, but actual meat and potatoes as it pertains to sports as we know it. The Ravens have been active the last couple of weeks, and the Brockers thing is an interesting little hiccup in the road if we do play football, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. We kind of got that Ryan Grant vibe from a few years ago when they signed him. A lot of us thought they paid a little bit too much for him. That was my feeling about Michael Brockers. Good player, but I thought the contract was a little bit too rich. And now, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I don't think the Ravens got cold feet. The doctor that failed his ankle, his physical, was independent, but it does make you think. I do like the Derek Wolfe signing. I think it makes more sense. He looks like he's healthy, and I think he had 7.5 sacks in 5 games, and he and Calais Campbell, when you think about that defensive line with Brandon Williams and Matt Judon, they should be able to exert some fierce pressure on the quarterback, plus all that draft capital that Eric DeCosta has accumulated. A first, 2 seconds, 2 thirds, 2 fourths. You got to figure in that group will be an inside linebacker, maybe 2 offensive linemen, 2 wide receivers, and a couple of edge rushers. And then later on, maybe he gets a safety or a cornerback type, or maybe even a running back late. So I think Eric DeCosta has enough. If he doesn't make any other signings, any other moves, although Jadeveon Clowney is still out there, and I know they have to restructure some deals. They don't like doing that. But lots of intrigue with the Ravens and the moves that they've made, and also the pending moves via the draft.
Well, you talk draft capital, right? And that is really what fires the whole offseason, I think, for all of us, is to say, could they find 3 or 4 real players here? Can they go out and find another wide receiver to complement this offense? How are they going to replace Marshall Yanda? The losses of Pierce and Wormley, it feels like they picked that up very nicely. And the way they played the Judon contract situation, the way that they wanted to get Jimmy Smith back, right? So, I could sit here and go through my WNST text right here, brought to you by Coons Ford, Dennis, and it has been active, and it feels like things are happening there, in addition to all the signings they actually made in the regular season, right?
Yeah, they're definitely moving in the right direction, and you have to love what Eric DeCosta has done. We know that Ozzie Newsome is still in the castle somewhere, lurking, also bouncing. Eric DeCosta is bouncing ideas off of him, but DeCosta seems to be willing to make more risk, more of a gamble in the draft and free agency than Ozzie had. Now, in Ozzie's defense, he was saddled with Joe Flacco's contract, and that's another story. Joe Flacco, he's out of a job. He's looking for one. He still wants to play. And with that big arm of his, you got to figure if he can find a team with a strong offensive line, a running game, and some wide receivers, he can still be effective. I would think that Bill Belichick would be interested, but unfortunately for them, they don't have any cap space left. But there's got to be a team out there that would give Joe Flacco a chance, I would think.
Well, then there's the whole quarterback revolving door and what's going to happen in the coming weeks leading up to the draft as well, and the fact that there aren't pro days, and the fact that the teams can't do visits, and that this is going to be a different way, and more than that, probably aids the Ravens even more, having had this cohesive unit for a quarter of a century as well.
I got to tell you a quick story. Years ago, I was down at the auction at BWI. It was winter, and all the cars were stuck in ice. It was a Ford factory sale, so they were all late-model cars. So here we are. We had a catalog with about 500 vehicles, and you had the auctioneer, but no cars came through the block. So you had to bid on the car from a piece of paper, given a condition report. And that's what this reminds me of, Nestor. The GMs have to make picks and make moves without being able to really put their eyes on the product, right? So it's intriguing, and this is where the cream rises to the top. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know what you're looking at. You've got to do your homework. If you're lazy, it's going to come back and bite you, just like the GMs that I went against many years ago. We were buying cars that were stuck in ice that we didn't see until 2 weeks later.
How'd you do?
We did well. Because I've always been an SOB, a student of the business, right? So if you study the business and you know what you're looking at, you have a good chance of being successful, right? So no different than in the NFL. The cream rises to the top, and the Ravens have such an outstanding organization. You have to have confidence in them. They know what they're looking at. They've done their homework. They had a pretty good idea. They were there at the combine, and I think they have a pretty good idea of who they want to select. They have the Red Star players. They always do. And hopefully some of those guys drop to them. But even if they don't, they have enough draft picks that they can package and move up. They don't have space for 8 new players. So I do see them trading up and maybe even into next year.
You mentioned Red Star players. You know where that came from? That came
Tell
from
me about it.
Ron Marcinak, who passed away last week. And Phil Savage isn't allowed to come on anymore because he works for the New York Jets, right? But Phil would tell Marcinak stories. And I got to know Ron Marcinak. He would always come out every year on draft day. The day after the draft, all the scouts would get together out at the barn. And you know about me with the envelopes. Have I ever told you the story on the envelopes?
No.
Oh, all right. Well,
please.
Well,
do.
You know what? Let me indulge at this point, Dennis. For you, while I get the ice organized on my back. All this sitting around has hurt my back, Dennis. So I got to get on the. I got a little ice here. So back in the '90s, Phil Savage and I and Eric DeCosta, we were always very close, and Brian was running the team, and people would call me around this time of the year, and I'll do a good phone call for you, Dan. You ready? Hey, Nasty, the Ravens got the number 4 pick in the draft. Who are they going to draft this year? Who's Ozzie want this year? And I would say, well, you know what? And it wasn't number 4. Like, take one of the years where we picked, like, Ed Reed, or we picked in the 20s or whatever, right?
Right.
The notion that, like, Ozzie knew who he was going to pick with pick 21, you know what I mean? And I would always say, there's no, and we all know this intuitively 20 years later, but then put your mind back to 1999, 2001, 2, in that era, before the draft was everywhere, and there were only a couple of little Our-Lads guides, and Joel Buxbaum, and you had to give Mel Kiper $50 to get the big books that he used to give to me.
Yeah.
So, and you did all that, right? So
I did, every one of them.
Well, you're going to love this. I can't believe you don't know this, and I still have some of them. I have them in an envelope, and when I find them, I will show them to you, okay? And I want to go back to, let me give you a year. Whatever year Travis LeBoy was drafted, which maybe 03, 04. Hold on, I'll let you know what year that was. Travis LeBoy was 04. He was a second-round pick, 42nd overall. And the reason I bring his name up, because it'll give you the era, okay? So in about 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, in that era, for those 5 or 6 years, Every year on the Friday before the draft, because the draft was always a Saturday, so I am dating myself now that the kids know this, right? Mm-hmm. That I would go to Owings Mills, and this is in the old building now, okay? And the new building. And I did both buildings, because the building was right around then. And I would go down the hallway with some Ravens letterhead and an envelope. And I would go door to door. Mike Pettin, Rex Ryan. I'm trying to think of all the people that participated in this over the year. Many. Joe Douglas participated many times. Andy Weidel. I feel like McDonough. Terry McDonough participated in this at various points. So, some people, right? Shaq Harris participated when he was around. And I would go door to door on all the scouts. And I would have them, I would go in, they would write on a sheet of paper the name of the player that they thought the Ravens would take on the first pick. Their first pick. Now, Ozzie could trade up, he could trade back. I wanted a player and a school, and and you would fold it up, put it in the envelope. I wouldn't look, okay? We would seal the envelopes. It was like a David Copperfield trick, okay? We would seal the envelopes on Friday. And I would walk out with 6, 8, 10, 12 envelopes. They would draft on Saturday and Sunday, okay? And then on Monday night, all of the scouts, Ron Marcinak was always one of them, we would all gather at the barn, and we would do radio. And this is Eric and Phil. We would do long segments. A lot of times we would call into the player that we drafted. Hey, Travis Taylor's going to be on the show. We just drafted him. Travis, welcome to Baltimore. How are you? The barn would explode with applause, right? We would do all that. And I would take those envelopes on that night and open them with all of the names that came out of, just to show that the scouts didn't even really know who we were drafting, but it always kind of told me on Monday night who the targets were, who the guys that they wanted in those drafts were. And it was a fascinating study, and this is before, Twitter and whatever, and I don't know that there could be any trust of such things in the modern era. But I can just tell you this, in those drafts, and I'm going through that specific draft because I think that draft we didn't draft until the second round. Maybe that was a year we traded away. Maybe that was our Courtney Upshaw year or something like that. Does that sound right? It was Dwan Edwards. Right. I should have Dwan on. It was Dwan Edwards was our pick. He was 51. So it was impossible to know who was going to be there at 51. But Travis LeBoy, Bob Sanders, I'm going to give you some names.
Oh, yeah, Bob Sanders. That one hurts because, you know what, they really wanted Bullet Bob, and if Bullet Bob was a Raven, we would have won at least one more Super Bowl. We wouldn't have lost to the Colts at home back in '06 either. He made such a big difference when he came back for that defense.
I want to say the 1 year, and maybe it was the '05 draft. I want to look it up because I won't get into this story again if I don't tell it to you. But the 1 year when I opened the envelopes, we had gotten like 3 of the players. Of the 6 names in the envelope, 3 of them wound up being Ravens because we dealt up and back and forth. It was the '05 draft. Dan Cody, do you remember that?
Sure do.
Dan Cody, Adam Terry, and Mark Clayton. But there were a bunch of other names of guys we didn't get in that draft that were like available and sort of on the watch at that point. Names that, because we were draft people, we're always into this, right? I think Vincent Jackson may have been one of them because we were always looking for a wide receiver, and he went 61. But either way, so I would do this every year, and this is how much I loved the draft back in the day, and it was a fun little exercise. But we can't do that anymore, right? So throwing the darts and knowing the picks, but Ron Marcinak gave my wife and I a crock pot that we still use, and I literally thought of Ron Marcinak last week. When he gave me a crock pot, and he was such an old-timer, right, Ron Marcinak, and it gave you the most old-time thing that I could possibly say. He gave it to me on my wedding, the summer of my wedding, 2003, And he said, now listen, I know your wife's got a job and you're a busy guy. This is easy. Your wife just chops up the vegetables. You throw it in there. At the end of the day, you got a meal. You got a meal. That's Ron Marcinek. And Ron Marcinek was also the reason we drafted Wes Pate. And he also scouted Stoney Case. So every time I had a Southwestern question about any player from Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Ron Marcinek knew that part of the world. I bet he stayed in every La Quinta and every Super 8 that there's ever been in Albuquerque.
That's really good stuff, Nestor. So what about the Red Star player, though? Where did that come from?
That was his. He was the guy who initiated the Red Star player.
Gotcha. Okay, got it. Okay.
He was the guy. I think it was like an old school, like 60s or 70s, kind of like your favorite player. Like if you had a Red Star employee every month, it would be your personal pick, and it wouldn't have to do with numbers or, you know, how many pancake blocks or how many, oil changes they made or how many cars they really sold or whatever. It would just be your gut instinct of, this is a player I want on my team. That's what the Red Star was. The Red Star was, this is the person I'm going to stick my neck out on. Could be a 3rd-round pick, 5th-round pick. It's not Peyton Manning, It's not Andrew Luck. It's not the blue chipper. It's a ham and egger. It's a Jarrett Johnson. Kelly Gregg.
It's also like Ray Rice. I know he was a Red Star player. I think he went 52nd overall, but Jamal Lewis, he was 5th overall. Sean Alexander, who they didn't get in the same draft because they got Jamal, he was also, and he went 27th overall. So I kind of gravitate towards running backs. And I do know from people there at the Castle in the past who've identified, at least in the running backs, that would be Red Star players for them.
Well, and every scout got one, and at the end, you say, this is my favorite player in the draft. Now, this is a realistic player that we could get in the 2nd, 3rd. This is my favorite player. This kid from Delaware, this kid from wherever, this kid from Rutgers, right? Whoever it would be. And I think we all have Red Star people in our lives, right?
Well, here's a big miss, though, for the Ravens, and you know the story. Matt Cavanaugh, right, who was the offensive coordinator, he was pounding the table for Tom Brady in the 3rd round in the year he came out, right? So we know how that turned out. Tom lasted until the 6th round. But can you imagine Tom Brady in a Ravens uniform with Ray Lewis and Ed Reed on defense?
I'm going to ask Brian Billick about that next time he's on, all right?
Yeah,
Brian is also question. Did you see him? Brian is sharing videos of his grandkids playing baseball and grandkids up on Poppy's lap on NFL Network now, making Tom Brady suggestions. It's been quite a month. It's been quite a march. Been a long, hard march, Dennis Koulatsos.
Here's the ironic part. Had they drafted Tom Brady, Brian Billick would still be coaching the Baltimore Ravens.
He'd be in his, 22nd year?
He'd be a Hall of Fame coach.
Well, Belichick still got his job, right? Marvin, is one tour of duty away from still being around. Tomlin's still hanging on, right?
Yeah, but he would have hitched his wagon to Brady and vice versa. He would have been a Hall of Fame coach for sure, and he'd still be playing with his grandkids, right?
Hey, Dennis, I'm trying to get my head back. Jason Garrett is no longer the Cowboys coach right now.
Oh, yeah, Jason Garrett. There you go. That guy. Unbelievable.
All right. Well, next week when you come on the program, or I join you on Thursday on the former Sunday Sports Voice, now the Dennis Koulatsos Show, heard 3 to 5 here on Thursdays, brought to you by Coons Ford, Jimmy Seafood, and a whole bunch of others. Robbie's First Base. I would say maybe next time we get together, we got to figure out who's quarterbacking where. We can play that little game, okay?
Yeah,
32 teams, 32 quarterbacks. Does Tyrod Taylor have a job? Just questions. Just where's Nick Foles? You brought up Joe Flacco. We can pin the team on the quarterback. How about that?
That sounds wonderful. I appreciate it.
See you on Thursday, Den.
Thank you, Nestor. Have fun.
Coons Ford, Security Boulevard. Make sure you go see him. They are still selling cars, fixing cars, dealing cars, helping people. You can find Dennis over Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. You can find me out in the, I tell you where I am. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm anywhere there's not a razor because, I haven't shaved in a month. Wearing my Baltimore Positive cap. I'm like the dude. I'm keeping calm. I'm staying local. And I am abiding by Baltimore Positive.